Hey everybody, Shamanic here for Shamanic Lodge. I'm going to talk a little bit about shamanic awakenings, shamanic quickenings, and shamanic temperings. First off, before the awakenings really come, and they can come at different phases of life in different ways for different people, there's usually going to be this phase of life where they kind of go away from society, go away from their normal circulation of friends and social activities, almost like that caterpillar, does when it's getting ready to go into the cocoon. And this is so they can get into the core of their energy and the resonant energy signature at that time for who they are at the end of that phase of life. It can involve getting into different cleansing practices, long periods of celibacy, meditations, diet changes, but a lot of things happen during that time that really helps them get back into their truth of their energy core. Different perspectives on life will start to change. And then they'll get a series of dreams or other activities that come up that just like get them to see life in this completely different way, and it's like an awakening. It's really obvious to them what's happening, although a lot of people aren't very clear on it, particularly people with no shamanic background, no shamanic training. They just know that something happened. Then they start looking on the internet and they find the people with the best advertising, marketing, and promotion techniques, and they go with them, and in many cases just go down the wrong road, to some new age kind of craziness, and get lost in that, or then turn around and find, somebody else real to work with. But then when I get somebody like that, then a lot of the phase is just a cleanup of what the other people put this person through, and then we start to lose some time. And this is why I really believe it's so important for everybody, whether you're in the shamanic studies or not, to just work on your own intuition. So when they start going into this shamanic awakening, again, because of the preparation before that, they start to pursue different things. And that can be different things that came along with dreams, different visions. Sometimes they have these waking dreams, that a lot of people would call visions. And this is where we get in a confusion about the definition of these words. And I tell people, don't worry too much about the definition or the source, more into like what's happening. I have a series of exercises I give people when they either want to start an apprenticeship or they go through these awakenings that help them focus more on their core and their self-identity, and also help really reconnect or connect the right and left brains together to where they able to easily communicate with and decipher messages from interdimensional realms, different types of consciousness and beings that are visiting them. Oh, a lot goes on at that time. The shamanic quickening. And also numbers. This is the time when people are just like totally seeing it, a series of numbers. Some of them are like the 11, 11, 10, 10s, 9, 9s, all this stuff on the clocks, especially when things happen. Now, there is that part where the conscious mind or subconscious mind really wants to push to find these numbers. And that's the other thing that people have to be aware of. So, as an example, when I'm working with someone or doing things with my apprentices on ceremonies or functions, and they're always like, look, another one, 10, 10, they look at the clock, 12, 12, yeah, okay. And then they're looking at me like I'm not getting as excited as they are, because I don't want to jump into la la land. You look at something, you're like, that happened. Acknowledge it, but don't throw gas on that fire. Let that happen at that time. Okay, we got that. Let's not make it bigger than what it is. So, and then we go into the shamanic quickening, and this is the part that's really important. The quickening, and there's different words for this in different languages, of course. A lot of times, if you're trying to look this up in English, it refers into pregnancy, when the the fetus really starts to take on human characteristics during a certain time period. That goes all the way back to Aristotle days. Um, in the same sense, what's happening in the shamanic quickening, this person, their personality, also many physical changes that'll happen with them, and their life cycles all start to turn more into a shamanic way. This is where the ego feels like it's dying or going crazy. This is where they start to lose contact with people they're in a relationship with. And this is also one of the reasons why I believe that before they even start the awakening phase, they go into this periods of solitude, celibacy, or isolation, so they don't have the interference of trying to go back into the relationships, or they feel they're going to lose somebody and things like that. And while they're going through this big change of this life cycle, other things are happening, and this is a time when they really need the constant contact with the teacher or the shaman mentor, because they can really feel like they're lost in this part. Most people who go through the shamanic awakening never get into the quickening because they're still stuck in all the programming that they're dealing with and trying to escape, or should be trying to escape during the awakening process. But here in the shamanic quickening, this is the time when they really need to stop any type of addictive smoking, drinking, any drug stuff, because that's when the negative effects of this, there are no positive effects of it. The negative effects of this really get enhanced, and this is when disease can set in. If their life's not really on a real Spartan type of diet and behavior, it just gets really chaotic, for that person at that time. This is a time when especially women have to be really, really careful of what energies they're allowing into them. The hookup culture, people just totally get destroyed in this phase. The people, like I said, with the addictive behaviors get wiped out. The people who are really focused on this path, they're the ones that become that fine-tuned machine if they stick with the process. Going through my mind here. So then after the quickening process happens, and then they go into the shamanic tempering. If I was to make another reference back into pregnancy, the shamanic tempering would be kind of like when the person is born. And they're sliding out of one world into another, and it takes a while for the physiology to catch up. And I make different references to the physiology catching up. Like I said, when people going through their changes, whether it's an apprenticeship or also in the shamanic awakening process, where they'll get these revelations, these dreams and things that'll happen. And the mind can adapt so fast. I mean, it's working like it's the speed of light or faster if that's possible. But the physiology cannot do that. The physiology is locked into that time constant on the physical plane, and it takes a while for that to happen. The only time you can really warp that time factor like that is in different geomantic and alchemical settings, sacred sites, and so on. So as this person is going into the tempering, just like that newborn baby, it's just like in that period, it's just eating, it's sleeping, it needs that peaceful state. Because in that, as there's going into this phase like this, it's a lot of its physiology is really adapting into the physical world. Well, with the person that's going through that shamanic tempering, their physiology is really adapting to life in between the worlds, the perceived realities, accepted realities of society, of their old self, because they have to remember who they were before this change so they can still interact in everyday life, because that's part of living in between the worlds. But then they also get more into their shamanic side. being that shaman, in that shamanic side. And when people are not going through apprenticeships and this process is happening, then it becomes even more difficult for them because they don't have any foundation and reference. So when I've worked with people like this, they're like scattered. And so it's a lot of phone calls or, video chats, throughout a day. I mean, it's hard for me to get things done. But at the same time, I don't want to see these people fall off the deep end because they're going through this for that purpose. And when people talk about, they come to me for a reading, what's my life purpose? I've seen readings, it's like looking like, oh, these things could happen to you in the very near future. And explaining the processes of the awakening, the quickening and the tempering. And they think, oh, that sounds good. Yeah, but you're planning a wedding. You want to get right into having children, your new job, and all that won't work, or it's going to turn out a lot differently than you plan, And then when it happens, it's like, okay, how do I stop this? You can just want it to stop. But when you want it to stop, and it does, you can't go back. And this is the other thing. People ask me, what's the saddest thing that you see in your shamanic life? The saddest thing that I see is when these things open up for people, and then they just kind of like want to do everything their way, their time. And then one day they just go, that opening just shuts. And they can feel it, they can hear it in their spirit, and it's just, boom, it's closed. And they want to go back, and I'm like, you can't. I told you that these things have to happen at this time, on this time frame, and that's that. That's not my schedule. That's the shamanic flow schedule. Same thing if we want to go back into pregnancies or moltings, when from caterpillar to butterflies, water nymph to dragonfly. That's on nature's timeline, and it has to be done on nature's timeline within the conditions of nature. The people who go along with this, at the end of it, it's like, oh yes, why did I resist? And well, I understand the resistance part. I mean, when I was going through this process in the first time, and so these things can happen throughout your shamanic life. The first time, being very young, just getting out of my teens, it was just kind of like a real shock. Of course, you're battling and when younger people are going through this, all the hormone stuff, is freaking you out, and then plus this stuff on top of it. And the quickening was the real difficult part, because I'm one of these people that I'm going to do it now. At warp speed, I'm going to do it now. I can do it. I can take it. Yeah. When guys go through midlife crisis and they're experiencing this stuff, it can be a disaster, or it can be a totally enlightening experience. Women are going through their sexual prime. It's a time where they're looking around. It's like, yeah, I just got to check myself out. Am I still attractive? Am I still desirable and all this? And then get polluted, during their process. When they're going through menopause, it's another thing. But actually, when they're going through menopause during the quickening, this is when they can really become that wise woman, the crone, the great shamanic community leader, if they can get through that process. And unfortunately, we don't have this communal support like we used to back, just, 3-4 generations ago, which makes all this stuff a lot difficult. What I do see, though, in regions, there'll be these waves of awakenings, quickenings, and temperings. And so this power, I keep saying that the power, when this stuff comes through, has a core to it, kind of like the eye of a hurricane. And it'll hit one person. It's probably the best person it could be in that region. And if that person can't handle that, doesn't want to do it, or just not keeping up with that timetable, it moves over to the next person. And then that person goes through that process. But a lot of people in that region, when it comes to the first person, start to go through these quickening process, or I'm sorry, awakening processes, and priming them for when the power wants to move to someplace else. And so that happens within a region. When I was in the Fort Lauderdale area, these waves were coming through for about 20 years, and that was like a mecca of places. I watched Sedona go through that when it was opening up, um, kind of, sort of with Taos, New Mexico, um, but Asheville, oh God, I remember the phases Asheville, North Carolina went through, and it was 99% women that were going through this. Very, very few men went through it. And that place just completely changed. And the women started forming groups, and then these groups were getting these awakenings, quickenings, and temperings. And that was a real phenomenal process to watch. So I watched this stuff going through these different regions, but now, and the only other time I saw this was at the end of the 80s, early 90s, watching it happen worldwide. And that was phenomenal because it was happening in the States for a while. I had friends in Europe that were telling me what was going on. And then finally it resonated and manifested in Colombia, South America, when I was down there in 2002. And that completely changed that hemisphere. But the people that were there, and this is a beautiful part about that, sometimes I get to work in places where people would just be like totally open and just go, okay, how do we need to handle this? Just give us the steps. And that project down there was just awesome. And like I said, Colombia went from being a war with 4 sides, and number 4 in the Pentagon's war room is a list of concerns, to write off the list within 8 months. And the people there are still benefiting from the process they went through. Like I said, that was in 2002. And of course, the equal and opposite reaction can come in if people don't maintain it. And that's something that I keep telling people. You go through these quickenings, especially the quickening part, you have to be committed to maintaining that personal status. If you're not, it just becomes this self-destructive journey after that. And then going back into the tempering is kind of like when we would make knives. You do the hardening process when it comes out of the fire into the water, and that makes that strength, but it doesn't harden evenly throughout the metal. The molecules, as you're dipping it in and it's getting cold now and cooling down and hardening, the molecules aren't equalized. The tempering is when you take that knife out and you put it in like the oven at 450 degrees and you leave it in there for like an hour. Now the molecules are working around, okay, and it becomes more stabilized. Now it's just a shared strength throughout the blade. And the same thing with the person. This is a point where they have to be cautious about leaving the quickening and really going out there and really doing the work. And like, I'm ready now. They get really ambitious. They see all the things that can be changed, how to change them. The picture's crystal clear. And I was like, just a little bit longer. Just here, let's do some exercises. Let's get you on this other ceremonial routine to make sure this tempering goes really well, so you can endure all the rest of the things that happen to you in the future. And then you'll already know the complete process, because this is going to happen again sometime in the future. I was trying to remember a few days ago how many times I went through these kind of changes, and over 44 years, I can't remember how many times, but enough. 10 plus, I'll give it that. So if you guys have any questions about this stuff, I think always leave comments. You can contact me. If you're having these things happen, you can contact me at shamaniclodge@gmail.com. I'm getting a lot of people contacting me about this stuff. And so here's the other thing, people. When you're telling me what's going on with you in your area, that helps me and other shamans map out what's happening in the world and how. We'll get visions of this stuff, but we're within my circles, we're very, very practical people. We like proof on the physical plane. It's so easy for the spirits to go ahead and lead people astray. Yes, there's always that kind of energy that wants people to not accomplish these things. And so we like that, what's happening on the physical plane is a confirmation like that. And I'm seeing things go, things were happening really hot and heavy in the northwest part of the United States for a little while. But then it looks like that power just kind of shifted across. And now I'm starting to, talking to somebody that's going through the same things over in Russia. And in part of Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe's still a hot spot. And again, the people I know went through that process are right next to the war zones and so on. People ask, who do these things better? The ones that take the initiative to make it happen. You guys have heard me give reference to Orshi, Shamanic woman on Instagram, who right in her awakening and quickening process, she just made the effort to just get me into her area and did everything needed. Just went very ambitious that way, and that just catapulted her into the lifestyle she's doing now. Lisa Glesvalle, Healers of Earth here on Instagram, same thing. On Instagram, did the same thing, took the initiative, and then now big life changes, and she's got her first post in Dominican Republic, and I'll explain posts on another video. I try to keep these not too long, So leave comments, ask questions, and I'll take your question. I'll give you answers. I don't mention people's names if you don't want that, and make other videos from that. But I want to appreciate all the support that I've gotten for EMA, my shamanic altar of the boat that I'm building for environmental and other shamanic work. If you'd like to support that, it's PayPal at Shaman Hawk. And hang with it, people. Everything we're going through can turn out to be a great results if we all work together on this, okay? Keep calm, don't fall for the bad distractions, and keep your eyes on the horizon.